The bitter Chicago wind cut through Elena's threadbare coat as she hurried down the deserted streets of Southside after her double shift at Rosie's Diner. Her fingers, red and cracked from 12 hours of washing dishes, clutched the meager tips that wouldn't cover tomorrow's bus fare, let alone Lily's medication, or the overdue rent her landlord had been hounding her about all week. At 27, Elena Morgan had already buried her parents, escaped an abusive ex-boyfriend, and dropped out of nursing school to keep her sick sister alive. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the snow-dusted sidewalk as she cut through the alley behind Wentworth Avenue. Elena had walked this route countless times, but tonight felt different. Somehow the silence heavier, the darkness deeper than usual. She nearly tripped over him, a crumpled form half hidden between a parked car and the brick wall of an abandoned storefront. At first glance, Elena thought it was just another pile of discarded clothes, until she noticed the expensive Italian leather shoes and the slight rise and fall of breathing. Dropping to her knees, Elena gently turned the boy over, gasping at his deathly pale complexion. He couldn't have been more than 14, dressed in clothes worth more than her entire year's salary a street. Michael's academy uniform beneath a cashmere coat that seemed wildly out of place in this neighborhood. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered, checking for injuries as her nursing school training kicked in. Pulse weak but steady, no visible wounds, but his skin felt cold and clammy, symptoms she recognized all too well. Rummaging through his pockets for identification or medication, her fingers closed around a sleek smartphone with a case that probably cost more than her weekly paycheck. The lock screen showed only one emergency contact. Papa, not a name, just that single word that would change the course of her life forever. Her finger hovered for just a moment before she pressed call, heart pounding as it connected almost instantly. Luca, a deep voice with a distinct Italian accent, responded, somehow managing to sound both concerned and threatening in that single word. This isn't Luca," Elena replied, her voice shakier than intended. "My name is Elena. I found a boy collapsed on Wentworth Avenue near 35th Street. I think this is his father's number." The silence that followed was so absolute that Elena thought the call had dropped, until she heard the faint sound of rapid breathing on the other end. "Is he breathing?" the man finally asked, his voice now hard as steel. All pretense of calm completely vanished. "Yes, but he's unconscious. I think it might be hypoglycemia. I was a nursing student and he's showing all the signs of severe low blood sugar," Elena explained, automatically falling into the clinical tone she'd practiced during her hospital rotations. "Do not move him. Do not call anyone else." The man's voice transformed into something that made Elena's blood run cold. "I'll be there in 8 minutes. Stay exactly where you are and keep him warm." Exactly 6 minutes later, Elena heard the purr of expensive engines as 3 black SUVs with tinted windows glided to a stop at the curb. 4 men emerged in perfect synchronization, 2 taking positions at each end of the alley, while the third scanned rooftops with practiced precision. The fourth approached with purposeful strides that spoke of absolute authority. Even from a distance, Elena could feel the power radiating from him, tall and imposing in a tailored Italian overcoat that couldn't quite conceal the bulge of what she instinctively knew was a shoulder holster. His features were sharp and aristocratic, dark hair silvering at the temples, a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His black eyes swept the street before settling on her with laser-like intensity. "Caruso," he introduced himself curtly as he knelt beside his son, his movements betraying none of the panic a normal parent would display. "You said hypoglycemia?" Elena nodded, watching as he produced a medical kit from his coat pocket with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. Within moments, color began returning to the boy's face, his eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes identical to his father's. "Papa," he mumbled, clearly disoriented. "I forgot my kit at basketball practice. I thought I could make it home." Caruso's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he helped his son sit up. "We'll discuss your poor judgment later," he said, though the relief in his voice undermined the attempted sternness. As they helped Luca to his feet, Elena awkwardly began to step away, considering her good deed done. "Wait," Caruso commanded without looking at her, the single word freezing her in place more effectively than any physical barrier. "Thank you for helping my son," he said, finally turning to face her fully, his penetrating gaze seeming to catalog every detail of her appearance, the faded uniform beneath her threadbare coat, the exhaustion etched into her features, the old bruise on her wrist she thought she'd hidden, and the determination in her eyes despite it all. "Anyone would have done the same," Elena replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Not in this neighborhood, not at this hour, not for a stranger who screamed wealth and vulnerability in equal measure. Caruso reached into his pocket, and Elena instinctively stepped back, her pride bristling at the thought of being offered money, or worse, given her history with men who took what they wanted. "I don't need a reward," she said quickly, chin lifting with the stubborn dignity that had carried her through years of poverty, abuse, and loss. "Not a reward," he corrected, extending a business card made of heavy stock paper with nothing but a phone number embossed in silver. "An opportunity. Call this number tomorrow morning at 9. I have a proposition for someone with your medical knowledge and moral character." As the convoy of SUVs disappeared into the night with Luca safely inside, Elena stood alone on the street corner, the expensive business card feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. She thought of Lily waiting at home, coughing through another sleepless night. She thought of Marcus's threatening texts. She thought of the eviction notice on her door. Something told her that accepting this opportunity would irrevocably change the course of her life. She just couldn't decide if that change would be salvation or destruction. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support means everything as we bring these stories to life. The third-floor apartment on Halstead greeted Elena with the familiar creak of rotting wooden stairs and the damp smell that never truly left. She eased the door open as gently as she could, but the rusted hinge still let out a thin, piercing shriek in the middle of the night. From the small bedroom at the end of the hall came Lily's dry coughing, one bout after another, as if her little sister's lungs were trying to force something out that they simply could not. Elena stood motionless in the dark, listening until the coughing softened, until it was replaced by the shallow, steady rhythm of a sleep that never rested. She stepped into the cramped bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. The pale light from a failing fluorescent bulb fell over nearly empty bottles. Prednisone, 3 pills left. Hydroxychloroquine, enough for 5 days. Pain medication gone since last week. Beside the mirror, a thick stack of bills pressed down on itself like slow-moving death sentences. The hospital bill, 60 days past due. The rent, 30 days past due. A notice that the electricity would be cut in 14 days. Elena closed her eyes and rested her head against the icy wall. 27 years old, and she was exhausted. Exhausted from working, exhausted from worrying, exhausted from fighting a world that seemed determined to grind her down into dust. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Elena pulled it out, her heart kicking faster when she saw a message from an unknown number. But she knew who it was. She always knew. "I saw you tonight. The alley on Wentworth. You can't hide forever, Elena." Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. Marcus. 2 years after she had escaped, after the restraining order, after everything, he was still there, still watching, still waiting. He had seen her in the alley tonight, which meant he had also seen the unconscious child, the black SUVs, and the man with eyes sharp as razors. Elena deleted the message with trembling fingers, even though she knew it changed nothing. Marcus would not stop. He never stopped. She pulled the business card from her coat pocket, feeling its weight in her palm. Thick paper, smooth as silk, with only a single phone number stamped in raised silver. No name, no address, just a door leading somewhere she could not see. Elena sat down in the worn chair by the window and stared at the card beneath the faint streetlight slipping through torn curtains. She stayed that way all night, not sleeping, not thinking, only staring. Outside, snow began to fall, laying a clean white sheet over the filthy city, as if trying to cover up everything rotten underneath. When the first light of dawn slid through the window, Lily's coughing started again, this time followed by weak footsteps. "Elena?" Lily appeared in the living room doorway, her face pale, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. "You did not sleep?" Elena quickly slipped the business card into her pocket. "It is fine. I am not tired." Lily studied her with eyes older than her 22 years. "You are not good at lying." She sat beside Elena and gave a dry cough. "What is it?" Elena was silent for a long time. Then she told her. About the child in the alley. About the man and his entourage. About the business card and the offer. She did not tell her about Marcus's message. Lily already had too much to carry. "You should call," Lily whispered when Elena stopped. "You have given up too much for me. Nursing school. Your life, if this is a chance. I do not know what kind of chance it is. That man, he is dangerous, Lily. I can feel it. More dangerous than not having money to buy my medicine, More dangerous than being thrown out onto the street? Elena did not answer. She did not have an answer. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, with trembling fingers and a heart pounding like a drum, Elena dialed the number on the card. It rang once, twice. Mr. Caruso's office. The woman's voice was cold as ice, empty of feeling. I am Elena Morgan. Mr. Caruso said I should call. A brief pause. Miss Morgan. Mr. Caruso is expecting you. Lincoln Park, 10 o'clock this morning. On time, but I do not know the address. A car will pick you up at the corner of Halsted and 35th in 45 minutes. Miss Morgan, Mr. Caruso does not offer second chances. Do not be late. The line went dead. Elena stared at the cracked mirror on the wall, wondering whether the woman looking back at her would still exist after today. Exactly 45 minutes after the call, a sleek black SUV pulled up hard at the corner of Halsted and 35th, standing out like a diamond in a pile of trash. Elena had been waiting there for 10 minutes already, wearing the most decent clothes she owned, a white button-down shirt yellowed at the collar, and black slacks bought from a thrift store 3 years earlier. The driver, a large man with an expressionless face, opened the rear door for her without a word. Elena slid onto the soft leather seat, and it felt as though she were stepping into an entirely different world. The vehicle glided through the familiar streets of the South Side, where broken-down houses huddled together like withered skeletons, where children played on cracked sidewalks, and homeless men slept in cardboard boxes on street corners. Then, little by little, the landscape began to change. Gray apartment blocks gave way to grand mansions. The streets grew wider, cleaner, lined with perfectly trimmed, leafless trees. When they entered Lincoln Park, Elena felt as if she were crossing an invisible border between two worlds, one where she fought to survive day by day, and one where wealth shone from every brick, every blade of grass tended with meticulous care. The SUV stopped before a massive iron gate, at least 4 meters tall, worked with delicate patterns in an old Italian style. A security camera turned slowly to follow them. A guard in a black suit stepped out from the booth, his face cold as ice. Identification. Elena handed over her worn driver's license, the only card she had. The guard studied it, as if examining a strange object, then went back into the booth and said something into a phone. Minutes passed in taut silence. Elena felt herself being judged, weighed, decided upon, as though someone were determining whether she was worthy of stepping through that gate at all. At last, the gate began to open, smooth and soundless, as if perfectly oiled. The SUV rolled forward, and Elena could not stop her mouth from falling open. The Caruso estate sat at the end of a drive paved with white marble, a castle in the style of the Italian Renaissance, with soaring columns and solemn arches. Out front, a massive fountain had frozen in the winter, forming fantastical shapes of clear crystal. The gardens on both sides were trimmed to perfection despite the snow season, with evergreen shrubs and white marble statues standing watch like silent guards. The entire property was probably as large as the whole block where Elena lived. The SUV stopped at the front steps. Elena climbed out, her cheap leather shoes making a crunching sound on the white gravel. Suddenly, painfully, she became aware of her own appearance. Her frayed coat, her hands roughened from washing dishes, her hair tied back in a hurry. She looked like a country mouse that had wandered into a palace. The huge oak doors swung open before Elena could even knock. A middle-aged man appeared, tall and lean, salt and pepper hair, sharp brown eyes. He wore an expensive gray suit, a gleaming gold watch on his wrist, and he looked Elena up and down with a chill, appraising gaze, as if pricing a cheap piece of merchandise. "Are you here to apply for the cleaning position?" Elena felt heat rush to her face. She knew what she looked like, but the open contempt in the man's voice still stoked her anger. "No." She lifted her chin, her voice steady even as her heart hammered like a drum. "I am here to see Mr. Caruso. He is expecting me." The man raised an eyebrow, his skepticism unchanged. Marco Benedetti, Mr. Caruso's advisor. He did not offer his hand, did not smile, only turned and walked inside. "Follow me." Elena followed Marco through an entry hall as wide as a small square, the polished granite floor reflecting light from a massive crystal chandelier overhead. Classical paintings in gilded frames lined the walls, marble statues stood in alcoves, and a spiral staircase rose to the upper floor like an architectural masterpiece. Each step she took echoed in the hush, reminding her that she did not belong here. Marco stopped before a heavy oak door at the end of the corridor and knocked twice, short and clipped. A warm, low voice came from inside. "Come in." Marco pushed the door open, then stepped aside, gesturing for Elena to enter. The oak door opened wide, and Elena found herself standing on the threshold of a world she had only ever seen in movies. A world where men like Dominic Caruso sat behind ancient desks like kings on their thrones, deciding the fate of everyone around them. Dominic Caruso's office felt like a small museum of power and history. Dark, glossy walnut bookshelves ran along the walls, packed with leather-bound volumes with gold-stamped spines, some of them so old Elena did not dare guess their age. Portraits of men hung above her, faces cut from the same cold stone, one generation after another of the Caruso line, all of them looking down with judgment in their eyes. A massive oak desk held the center of the room, and on it there was only a closed laptop, an expensive fountain pen, and a small photograph that Elena could not make out from where she stood. And behind that desk, Dominic Caruso sat like an emperor on his throne. He did not rise when Elena walked in. He did not nod in greeting. He only watched her with unblinking, bottomless dark eyes, as if he were reading every thought inside her head. Light poured from the large window behind him, turning him into a figure of authority made of shadow, his face half lit and half swallowed by darkness, as if he himself were a blend of two worlds. "Sit down, Miss Morgan." His voice was low and even, not an invitation but a command. Elena sat in the leather chair across from the desk, feeling like a defendant waiting for a sentence. Marco Benedetti remained by the door, arms folded, still staring at her with undisguised suspicion. "My son has type 1 diabetes," Dominic began, his tone empty of emotion, like a man reciting a financial report. "A rare form. His blood sugar swings outside normal patterns, hard to predict and extremely dangerous if it is not monitored 24/7. Last night, you saved his life. I only did what anyone with basic medical knowledge would do." "No." Dominic leaned forward, his gaze cutting straight through her. "You did more than that. You stayed. You did not call the police or an ambulance, even though that would have been the normal reflex. You followed instructions from a stranger over the phone." "Why?" Elena hesitated for a single second. "Instinct. I have reasons not to trust the police." Dominic nodded as if the answer had been exactly what he expected. "The previous nurse for Luca is no longer working for us." The way he said it, with that small pause before the words "no longer," sent a chill down Elena's spine. She did not ask anything more. She did not want to know. "I need a replacement. Someone with medical knowledge, good instincts, and most importantly, morals. $8,000 a month. You will live in this estate, accompany Luca to school, monitor his health everywhere, at all times. In addition, tuition for you to complete your nursing degree will be paid in full." Elena felt as if she could not breathe. $8,000 a month, 10 months of pay at Rosie's diner, enough to pay Lily's hospital bill, enough to buy the medicine, enough to leave the rotting apartment behind and start over. But she was not foolish. "What do you do for a living, Mr. Caruso?" Elena asked bluntly, her voice steady, even as her heart went wild. "Your real work." The room fell into silence. Marco cleared his throat sharply from the doorway, but Dominic only looked at her, and something like respect flickered across his dark eyes. "I protect my family," he said at last, "by whatever means are necessary. I am not naive. I know what that means. I know you are not naive." Dominic opened a desk drawer, took out a thick file, and slid it toward her. "I know about your parents, about the car accident 8 years ago caused by a drunk driver. I know about your sister, Lily Morgan, 22 years old, systemic lupus erythematosus, being treated at Cook County Hospital with a bill 60 days overdue. I know about Marcus Cole, your ex-boyfriend, former police officer, fired for violent conduct, the man you have a restraining order against who keeps violating it without consequence." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the file as if it were a venomous snake, angry and afraid at the same time. You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone who comes near my son. No exceptions." Dominic closed the file. "The question is, what will you do with this information? Run, or accept that this is the world you are about to enter?" Elena tightened her grip on the chair arms, trying to hold back her anger. He knew everything about her, every pain, every secret, every weakness, and he used it like a blade, not to stab her, but to show her he could stab whenever he wanted. But she understood something else, too. He knew it all, and he was still sitting here, still making the offer. That meant he needed her. And in this world, need was power. "I have one condition," Elena said, her voice steadier than she expected. Lily gets full medical care, the best doctors, the best medicine, everything she needs. Dominic nodded without a second of hesitation. Agreed. Anything else? Never lie to me. Elena held his gaze. No matter how brutal the truth is, I want to know. No hiding. No half measures. Silence stretched between them. Then Dominic Caruso did something Elena did not expect. He smiled. Just for an instant. A small curve at the corner of his mouth. But it transformed his cold face for a moment. You are different, Miss Morgan. I appreciate that. Dominic stood and reached his hand across the desk. And Elena, with her heart pounding like a war drum and her mind screaming that this was the most reckless thing she had ever done, stood and placed her calloused hand into his warm palm. The moment skin met skin, she felt the weight of the bargain settle into every bone, as if she had just shaken hands with the devil, and there was no way back. That afternoon, a car was sent to the old apartment to collect the few belongings Elena had. She called Lily from the new phone Dominic had provided and explained everything as briefly as she could. Her sister cried, not from sadness but from relief, and Elena had to bite down hard on her lip to keep her own tears back. When she stepped into the room assigned to her in the Caruso estate, she froze on the threshold for a few seconds, unable to believe what she was seeing. The room was larger than the apartment where she and Lily had lived for the past 3 years. A king-size bed with white linens as clean as clouds, a polished walnut wardrobe, a vanity with a gold-framed mirror, and a large window looking out over the snow-covered garden. The private bathroom held a marble tub and gold-plated shower fixtures. Elena set her battered old bag, holding everything she owned, down on the glossy oak floor, feeling like she had stepped into someone else's dream. A soft knock made her turn. A middle-aged woman stood in the doorway, full-figured, black hair threaded with silver gathered neatly at the nape of her neck. Her face was stern, but her brown eyes held more warmth than anyone Elena had met in this house. I am Isabella, the housekeeper. She stepped in and placed a stack of towels on the bed. Dinner is at 7. Young Master Luca eats in the small dining room on the first floor. Mr. Caruso rarely eats with him. Thank you. Isabella paused at the door and looked back at Elena with something like pity. You are the 4th in 2 years. The ones before you did not last long. She sighed. Luca does not warm easily to strangers. Do not take it personally. He has lost too much. Before Elena could ask anything else, Isabella was gone, her steps quiet in the hushed hallway. Elena spent the next hour arranging her few belongings, trying to learn the shape of her new space. She was hanging her old coat in the wardrobe when she felt someone watching her. When she turned, Luca was standing in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, arms crossed, black eyes just like his father's staring at her with undisguised contempt. Another nanny. His voice was cold as ice. How long will you last? 3 months? 6 months? Elena did not react. She simply stood there, looking at the 14-year-old boy with an angel's face and the eyes of someone who had been hurt too many times. The one before you cried after 2 weeks, Luca went on, his voice turning more bitter. The one before that ran off in the middle of the night without even saying goodbye. But at least they were better than my mother. He gave a sharp little laugh, but it never reached his eyes. She lasted 3 years before she could not take it anymore. Left when I was 3. At least she said goodbye. Elena felt a tight, aching stab in her chest. She saw herself in this boy. Anger used to hide pain. Walls built to protect a heart that had been shattered too many times. I am not your mother, Elena said, her tone calm. And I do not run. They all say that. I am not them. Luca held her gaze for a few seconds longer, as if searching for a crack in her calm. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Dinner was a silent battle. Luca sat across from Elena in the small dining room, his plate of food untouched. He did not lift his fork, did not check his blood sugar even though the meter sat right beside him. He just sat there watching Elena with a defiant stare, as if waiting for her to scold him, waiting for her to lose control, waiting for her to become just another adult trying to take charge of his life. But Elena did nothing. She ate her own dinner in silence, and when she finished, she pushed her plate aside and stayed there, waiting, not speaking, not judging, just being there. 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes, half an hour. Luca began to fidget. He looked at his plate, looked at Elena, then looked back at his plate. Finally, with an irritated sigh, he picked up his fork and began to eat. A few minutes later, he reached for the blood sugar meter and pricked his finger, the movement so familiar it was almost automatic. 110, he muttered without looking at Elena. Normal. Good. That was all she said. No praise, no lecture, just a single word. When Luca stood to leave the dining room, he paused for a moment at the door. He did not turn around, but he paused. And in that instant, when Luca thought she was not watching, Elena caught something flicker across the boy's face, hidden deep beneath the armor of arrogance. Loneliness, the same loneliness she saw in the mirror every morning. A week passed inside the Caruso estate, and Elena slowly learned the rhythm of this house. 6 o'clock in the morning, Isabella began preparing breakfast in a kitchen as large as a restaurant. 7 o'clock, Luca woke up, checked his blood sugar, ate breakfast in an icy silence. 8 o'clock, the car took him to St. Michael's Academy with Elena in the front passenger seat. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they returned. 4 o'clock, Luca did homework in his private room, still refusing every attempt Elena made to talk. 7 o'clock, dinner. 10 o'clock, a final blood sugar check before sleep. Every day the same, steady as a piece of music programmed to repeat. But there was one presence that was almost invisible in that schedule. Dominic Caruso. He was like a ghost in his own home, always shut away in his office, or gone for days at a time. Elena only caught glimpses of him, a shadow passing down the corridor at midnight, the sound of an engine leaving the estate while the sky was still dark. He and Luca rarely ate together, and when they did, the meal unfolded in a heavy silence Elena could feel even from the next room. On the afternoon of the 7th day, Elena was walking down the first-floor hallway to find Isabella and ask about Luca's vaccination schedule when she stopped short. The meeting room door was slightly open, and Dominic's voice carried out, cold as ice, sharp as a blade. "If he does not pay by Friday, you know what to do." Another voice answered, trembling, pleading, "Mr. Caruso, please give me more time." Dominic's voice did not rise, but somehow it became even more frightening. "Time ran out last month. I will not say it a third time." Then a hard sound slammed through the air. Elena flinched, her heart skittering, imagining horrors behind the door. Blood, violence, death. She almost ran, until she realized it was only a door. The sound of another door inside the room being thrown shut, quick footsteps, and then silence. Elena moved away fast, not daring to look back, her heart still pounding like it was trying to break out of her ribs. She reminded herself for the 100th time that she had known who he was when she signed that agreement. She had no right to be shocked, no right to be afraid, and yet she was afraid. That night, Elena could not sleep. She lay in the dark, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to winter wind whistle through the window. At 2 o'clock in the morning, her throat dry, she decided to go downstairs to the kitchen for water. The estate was still as a giant tomb, her footsteps soft and echoing on the wooden floor in the pitch-black hallway. As she passed Luca's door, she stopped dead. A figure stood there, in front of the boy's room, silent as a statue. Dominic. Elena eased back into the shadows and held her breath, survival instinct making her want to disappear. From where she stood, she watched him. Dominic was there in simple sleep clothes, barefoot, hair slightly mussed, nothing like the man in an expensive suit by day. He opened Luca's door so gently it made no sound at all, then slipped inside. Through the narrow crack, Elena saw him walk to his son's bedside. Dominic stood there for a long time, only watching. Then he bent down, and his large hand brushed softly over Luca's black hair, a gesture so tender Elena felt as if she were intruding on something private and sacred. His broad shoulders sagged, as though in this moment, when no one was watching, he allowed himself to be weak. Then Dominic turned back. His dark eyes met Elena's in the shadows. She stood there, unable to move, unable to explain, caught watching the most private moment he owned. She waited for anger, for a rebuke, or worse, but nothing came. Silence held. 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds. At last, Dominic only gave a slight nod, almost unconscious, and then he walked the other way and disappeared into the darkness at the end of the hall. Elena remained there a long time, trying to make sense of what she had seen. There were 2 Dominic Carusos, the darkness that made all of Chicago tremble, and the father who stood in the night watching his child sleep. Elena did not know which of them was more dangerous to her heart. 2 weeks passed, and the relationship between Elena and Luca still felt like 2 icebergs drifting side by side, not colliding, not melting either. The boy remained distant, still answering in clipped phrases, still determined to prove he did not need anyone. But Elena noticed small changes. Luca no longer skipped meals on purpose to test her. He checked his blood sugar on time without being reminded. Sometimes, only sometimes, he would answer one of Elena's questions with more than a single word. It was not friendship. It was not even acceptance yet, but it was progress. On Wednesday morning, Elena sat in the bleachers beside the indoor basketball court at St. Michael's Academy, watching Luca play with his classmates. He moved fast across the floor, slim but agile, and for the first time Elena saw him smile for real. Not the thin, contemptuous smirk he usually gave her, but the smile of an ordinary 14-year-old having fun. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a message from Lily. "The doctor says the test results are much better. The new medication is working. I love you." Elena smiled, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the weight on her shoulders ease. Just a little. Then she heard the screaming. Elena lifted her head, her heart picking up speed. On the court, students were gathering into a tight circle around someone on the floor. She did not need to look closely to know who it was. She ran down the bleachers, pushed through the panicked crowd. Luca was curled on the polished wood, his whole body shaking violently. But something was wrong. Elena had seen him go low before, in that alley on the first night, and the symptoms were not like this. "Move back. Give me space." Elena dropped to her knees beside Luca, her hand moving fast to check his pulse. Fast and weak. Red blotches were spreading over his skin. His lips were swelling, and he was wheezing as if someone were squeezing his throat from the inside. Luca gagged, then vomited on the floor, his body jerking in uncontrolled spasms. This was not hypoglycemia. This was an allergic reaction. Anaphylactic shock. Elena's mind flashed to the medical report she had read last night. Luca had been switched to a new insulin the week before, a synthetic one with a different formula. His body was rejecting it violently. "Does anyone have an EpiPen?" Elena shouted at the gym teacher who stood frozen. "Call the school medical staff, right now." She pulled out her phone and dialed Dominic with one hand, while the other kept Luca's head turned to the side so he would not choke on his vomit. The line rang once. Twice. "Elena." Dominic's voice was sharp, alert. "Luca is in anaphylactic shock. Reaction to the new insulin. He needs epinephrine now. We are in the school gym." She did not wait for an answer. She ended the call and focused entirely on the boy trembling in her hands. "Luca, look at me." Elena tapped his cheek gently, forcing his glassy eyes to lock on hers. "You need to stay awake. Listen to my voice. Do not sleep." Luca tried to speak, but only a ragged wheeze came out. His lips were beginning to turn blue. The school nurse rushed over with a first aid kit, but Elena knew it would not have what they needed. A standard diabetes kit was useless in a moment like this. "Breathe slow, Luca. Match my rhythm." Elena kept her voice steady even though her heart was pounding like a drum. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. Good. Keep going. 3 minutes passed like 3 hours. Luca stayed conscious because Elena kept talking, kept pulling him back, kept forcing him to focus. His breathing grew more strained, his pulse weaker. Then the sound of running footsteps hammered down the corridor. Dominic burst into the gym like a storm, followed by a man carrying a medical bag, the family's private doctor. Within seconds, an epinephrine injection was driven into Luca's thigh. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Luca's breathing began to steady. The red blotches started to fade. The boy coughed hard, then opened his eyes, black eyes wide with panic and fear. "Elena." His voice was raw, thin as thread. "I am here." Elena gripped his hand, refusing to let go even when Luca squeezed hard enough to hurt. "I am here." Luca looked at her, and for the first time the wall of arrogance collapsed completely. The 14-year-old vanished, leaving only a frightened child who had been abandoned too many times. "Do not leave me." Tears rolled toward his temples. "Please, do not go like my mother did." Elena felt her heart break into a million pieces. "I am here." She tightened her hold on his hand. "I am not going anywhere." From the doorway, Dominic stood motionless, watching his son cling to this woman, as if she were the only anchor in the storm, and something shifted behind those cold black eyes, something that looked dangerously like hope. 3 days after the incident at school, Luca had fully recovered physically. The family's private doctor confirmed that the boy was allergic to a protein component in the new insulin and switched him to a different formula. But the biggest change was not the medication. It was the way Luca looked at Elena. The cold, contemptuous stare was gone. The clipped one-word answers were gone. He still was not completely open, but the wall had cracks now, And sometimes, only sometimes, Elena caught him watching her with an expression she did not dare name. On the third night after the incident, Elena woke at 2 a.m, with cold sweat soaking the back of her shirt, her heart slamming wildly in her chest. The nightmare still clung to her mind, Marcus's hand tightening around her throat, the crazed look in his eyes, his breath at her ear as he whispered, "You belong to me, forever." She sat up, trying to slow her breathing, but the darkness in the room felt suffocating. She needed light. She needed water. She needed to get out of this room, even for a few minutes. The estate's vast kitchen was silent in the dead of night, lit only by a small lamp above the sink that cast a dim pool of light. Elena pushed the door open and stepped inside, then stopped short. Dominic was sitting alone at the kitchen island, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the bottle beside him already half gone. He was not wearing a suit the way he did during the day, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, collar open, less imposing, but no less dangerous. "Can't sleep." His voice was low in the dark. Elena meant to turn back, but her feet would not move. A nightmare. Me too. She had not expected him to admit that. The sudden honesty drew her deeper into the kitchen. She poured a glass of water and sat in a chair a few steps from Dominic. Silence stretched between them, but it was not as heavy as it had been before. Something had shifted after the school incident. A thin, invisible thread between them, fragile, undeniable. "You did well," Dominic said suddenly. "That day, with Luca. Others would have panicked. I am trained not to panic, not training." He looked at her, dark eyes like two deep abysses. "You have faced death before, more than once. I can see it in your eyes." Elena did not answer. She lifted the water to her lips, and that was when she realized she had forgotten to wear the bracelet that covered her scars. Pale white lines crisscrossed her wrist, not self-inflicted, but from rope, from the times she had fought to get free of Marcus's control. Dominic saw them. Of course he did. Nothing escaped those eyes. "Tell me," he said. Not a demand, not an order, only a quiet invitation, and Elena, for reasons she could not explain, began to speak. She told him about Marcus Cole, about how they met after she had lost her parents, when she was weak and lonely, about how he was kind at first, then slowly became controlling, isolating her from friends, from family, about the first time he hit her and said it was her fault, about 2 years of hell, when she became the shadow of herself, about the night he almost killed her, his hands around her throat, his eyes gone mad, no longer the man she had once loved, about the shard of broken glass she used to defend herself, blood across the floor, about the 911 call and the police arriving 40 minutes late, about Marcus's former colleagues covering for him, about the restraining order being nothing but useless paper, about the threatening messages that still came with steady regularity every week. Dominic stayed silent through the whole story. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. He only listened, his jaw clenched so hard Elena could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "What is his full name?" Dominic's voice sounded like a blade being sharpened on stone. "It does not matter anymore. I got out. To me, it does." Dominic lifted his hand, slowly, as if he were trying to hold himself back. His fingers came close to her cheek, so close Elena could feel the warmth radiating from him. Then he pulled away and curled his hand into a fist on the table. Tense silence filled the kitchen. "You are afraid of me," Dominic said. It was not a question. Elena met his eyes without blinking, without backing down. "I am afraid of what I feel when I am near you. That is different." 2 weeks after that night in the kitchen, the relationship between Elena and Dominic remained a gray space no one dared to define. They did not bring up that conversation again, but something had shifted in the way he looked at her, in the way he paused for one extra beat whenever he passed her in the hallway. Then, one morning, Dominic summoned her to his office with an expression she could not read. "Saturday night there is a charity gala at the Drake. I need you to come with me to watch Luca." Elena stared at him, stunned. "Me? At a high society event?" She looked down at her simple clothes. "I do not have anything to wear for something like that." Dominic only nodded as if he had expected the reaction. "Isabella will handle it." Saturday afternoon, Isabella led Elena into a room she had never entered before, a private dressing room lined with glass cabinets filled with gowns and accessories. Hanging on a rack, a black satin silk evening dress waited for her, an elegant bateau neckline, a daring open back, the skirt falling to the floor like a stream of night. Beside it were black high heels, a simple but refined strand of pearls, and a small silver clutch. An hour later, Elena stood in front of the full-length mirror and did not recognize herself. The woman in the glass wore her brown hair swept up in a graceful twist, soft strands falling around her face. Her green eyes were touched with light makeup, her lips a natural rose. The dress hugged curves she had forgotten she even had, turning her from an exhausted dishwasher into someone radiant and unfamiliar. For the first time in years, after Marcus, after everything he had destroyed inside her, Elena felt beautiful. Dominic was waiting at the foot of the staircase when she came down. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, hair slicked back, looking like he had stepped off a magazine cover. But when he saw Elena, he went still, and for a brief moment the cold mask slipped away entirely. His dark eyes swept from head to toe, then stopped on her face, and Elena saw something there that made her forget how to breathe. Dominic paused, swallowing hard. "We should go." The Drake Hotel glittered like a palace in the winter night. Massive crystal chandeliers poured warm golden light over the grand ballroom, where hundreds of guests in elegant evening wear chatted and laughed, champagne glasses in hand. Elena walked at Dominic's side, one hand resting on his arm the way Isabella had taught her, trying not to show how completely out of place she felt among the wealthiest people in Chicago. Luca trailed behind in a small suit, looking bored but not protesting. All evening, Elena noticed the way people looked at Dominic. Respect. Fear. The way the crowd automatically opened when he passed. She also noticed the way he kept glancing toward her even while speaking to someone else. Those dark eyes always searching for her in the sea of faces. "All the biggest families in Chicago are here tonight," Marco murmured in her ear, while Dominic spoke with a politician. "The Carusos from Italy, the Volkovs from Russia, the O'Briens from Ireland. This is neutral territory, but do not let that fool you. Every eye is watching." Luca said he was tired after 2 hours, and Elena guided him to a sofa in a quiet corner to rest. When she was sure he was fine, she went to get water and found herself standing alone near the buffet table when a voice sounded behind her. "So you are Caruso's new possession. Interesting." Elena turned. A middle-aged man stood before her, perhaps in his 40s, with silver hair combed back and gray eyes cold as ice. He was tall and lean, wearing a white suit that stood out among the black tuxedos, a smile on his mouth that never reached his eyes. Viktor Volkov. He did not offer his hand, only looked at her as if pricing merchandise. "And you are Elena Morgan, former nursing student, worked at Rosie's diner, a sister with lupus." He tilted his head. "I wonder how long you will survive in Caruso's world. The one before you did not last very long." Elena felt the blood in her body turn to ice, but she did not step back. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Oh, I think you do." Volkov moved closer, his voice dropping into a whisper. "Caruso thinks he can protect everyone, but he can't. No one can. Remember that, little girl, Miss Morgan." Marco's voice cut in. He appeared as if from nowhere and took Elena by the elbow. "Mr. Caruso needs you." Marco pulled her away without looking at Volkov, but Elena could feel those icy gray eyes burning into her back the whole time. From across the room, Dominic saw everything, his face hardened like stone, his dark eyes flaring with something dangerous. On the way home, the SUV was silent as a tomb. Luca had fallen asleep, his head resting on Elena's shoulder. Dominic sat across from them, not looking at her, but his voice was cold as he spoke into the darkness. "Viktor Volkov does not play by the rules. He is willing to target anyone to destroy me." At last he turned, dark eyes piercing her. "Including you, especially you." In the days after the gala, Elena began to feel invisible eyes burning into her back. At first she told herself it was paranoia, the aftertaste of her encounter with Volkov and the threat in his voice, but then she started to notice. The black sedan parked across the street every morning when she drove Luca to school, always in the same spot, always with someone inside even though the engine never ran. The man in the gray coat standing on the corner across from the gates of Street. Michael's phone lifted as if he were taking pictures. The delivery van that crawled by at an unnaturally slow pace whenever she stepped outside the estate. Elena was not easily rattled. She had lived with fear too long to mistake the difference between imagination and an instinct warning her of something real. She told Marco on the 3rd day. He listened, his face tightening, then made a call in Italian. A few minutes later he turned back to her, his expression grave. "Volkov's people. He is watching you. Watching Luca. Marking territory." Marco let out a breath. "I will inform the boss." That night, Elena was upstairs reading Luca's medical reports when her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She opened the message, and the blood in her veins turned to ice. It was a photograph taken from a distance, and yet it was terrifyingly clear. Elena and Lily sitting in a small cafe on the south side, the one where they met last week. Lily was smiling, coffee cup in hand, completely unaware that someone had been watching. Beneath the photo was a single line of text, "Two beautiful sisters." It would be a shame if something happened. Elena called Lily at once, her heart pounding until she heard her sister's voice on the other end. Lily was safe. At home. Nothing unusual. But it did nothing to loosen the fear choking Elena's chest. She ran downstairs and found Dominic in his office. He was seated behind the desk, but when he saw her face, he stood immediately. Elena handed him the phone without saying a word. Dominic looked at the photo, looked at the message, and Elena watched the change cross his face, from calm to a cold fury, the kind that did not shout, the kind that was silent and lethal. "Get out," he said to Marco at the door. When they were alone, Dominic looked at her. "It has been handled." "Handled how?" "Lily has been moved to a new apartment in the Gold Coast. Security 24/7. A private doctor. Everything she needs." Elena went still. You moved my sister without asking me." "I did not have time to ask," Volkov marked her. "Every second she stays in the old apartment is a second in the crosshairs." "You do not have the right." Elena felt anger flare up. Familiar and frightening all at once. "You can't control my life like this. I am keeping you alive." Dominic stepped closer, his voice lower but no less intense. "Both of you. From now on, you will have security with you everywhere. You do not leave the estate alone. You do not meet Lily in public. You do not contact anyone from your old life without telling me first. You are rewriting my entire existence." Elena felt tears rise, not from sadness but from helplessness. "You are turning me into someone who depends on you." Like she stopped, but Dominic understood. "Like Marcus. Do not." Her voice shook. "Do not compare. I am not him." Dominic stood directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him. "I will never hurt you, but I will not let anyone else do it either." He looked at her, his dark eyes holding something she did not dare name. "Do you want to be dead and free, or alive and protected?" Elena did not answer. She had no answer. That night, lying in her luxurious room that suddenly felt like a prison, Elena understood the truth. She had traded one cage for another. The only difference was that this cage came with a devil who looked at her as if she were the only light left in his darkness. A week into the new restrictions, Elena felt like she was suffocating. She understood the reason behind every security measure, understood that Dominic was trying to protect her, but the feeling of being caged still pressed on her chest like a stone. So when she asked permission to visit Rosa Martinez, the old neighbor who had cared for Elena and Lily through their hardest years, she did not expect Dominic to agree. He studied her for a long moment in silence, then nodded. 1 hour. A guard goes with you. You do not go anywhere else on your own." Elena agreed immediately, too grateful to argue. Rosa's small apartment looked exactly as Elena remembered, warm and cluttered with the smell of Mexican food and images of the Virgin Mary on the walls. Rosa hugged Elena the way you hug a daughter you have not seen in a long time, smoothing her hair and asking questions without stopping. For that brief hour, Elena let herself forget the lavish estate, forget Volkov and the watching eyes, forget everything except the familiar warmth of the woman who had been family when Elena had no one left. Rosa asked about the new job, the new life, and Elena answered carefully, hiding the darkest parts. When it was time to leave, she promised she would come back soon, even though she did not know if she would be able to keep that promise. On the way back, the black SUV hit an unusual traffic jam near the south side. The guard behind the wheel, a large man named Tony, frowned at the line of cars ahead. "Looks like an accident. I will take a detour." He turned into a narrow alley behind a row of abandoned warehouses, where the light was thin and shadows stretched long across cracked brick walls. Elena felt unease rise in her stomach, but she said nothing. They made it halfway down the alley when a small delivery truck suddenly shot out from the corner and blocked the road. Tony slammed the brakes, and the SUV stopped with a high, piercing squeal. "Stay here," he ordered, and climbed out to check. Elena watched through the window, her heart beating faster. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. She saw a figure surge from the darkness, and Tony went down before he could react, struck from behind with something heavy. Then the door on her side was yanked open, and a hand that was terrifyingly familiar clamped around her arm and dragged her out with brutal force. Marcus Cole. He stood there with alcohol on his breath, eyes bloodshot and wild, the same way they had been the night he almost killed her 2 years ago. The face that had once been familiar was twisted now with rage, and Elena felt the old fear come rushing back as if it had never left. "You think that rich Italian can protect you?" Marcus roared, slamming her into the icy brick wall, one hand tightening around her throat. "You belong to me. You have always belonged to me." Elena could not breathe. She clawed at his hand, kicked at his shin, fought back with every scrap of strength she had learned to summon in 2 years of hell. But Marcus was too strong, too crazed, and he only squeezed harder, a sick smile spreading across his mouth. "I have been watching you," he whispered into her ear, his breath hot and vile. "I saw you in that pretty dress at the party. I saw you living in a castle. You think you can hide from me. You think you can replace me." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I am going to teach you a lesson you will never forget." Elena felt her vision blur, her lungs burning without air. She thought of Lily, of Luca, of Dominic. She could not die here. Not by his hands. Not like this. Then, suddenly, the pressure on her throat vanished. A man in a black suit appeared as if from nowhere and drove his fist into Marcus's face with enough force to send him stumbling back. Before Marcus could recover, the man took him down to the ground and snapped handcuffs behind his back with the clean, practiced movements of someone trained. Elena slid down the wall and collapsed onto the filthy pavement, her whole body shaking out of control. A backup vehicle. Dominic had sent 2 cars with her, not one. 10 minutes later, another SUV tore into the alley at a terrifying speed. Dominic climbed out, his face white as death, his dark eyes sweeping the scene until they found Elena. He ran to her and dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as he checked her throat, bruises already blooming on her pale skin. "Elena." His voice was rough, as if someone had been choking him too. "Elena, look at me." She looked at him, and that was when she broke. In the car on the way back, Elena finally collapsed. The tears she had held back for years poured out like a broken dam, choking sobs ripping through the silence. Dominic said nothing. He only took her hand in his and held it tight the entire ride home. "No one touches you again," he whispered, his voice like an oath carved in stone. No one. The next morning, Elena woke in her room with no memory of how she had gotten back here. She lay there for a long time, staring up at the familiar ceiling, trying to piece together the scattered fragments from the night before. The dark alley, Marcus's hand around her throat, tears in the car, Dominic's hand gripping hers. Then everything turned hazy, as if her mind had protected her by erasing the most painful parts. Her throat ached when she tried to swallow, and she knew that if she looked in the mirror she would see finger-shaped bruises Marcus had left behind, a sick mark of possession. A soft knock startled her. "Elena." Luca's voice came through the door, nothing like his usual coldness. "Can I come in?" Elena pulled the blanket higher to hide her neck before she answered. The door opened, and Luca stepped in carrying a breakfast tray. Toast, eggs, orange juice, and a small flower tucked into a glass cup. He set the tray on the table beside the bed, then sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at her with real worry in his eyes. "Are you okay?" His voice was quiet, nothing like the bitterness she had grown used to. "Dad told me what happened." Elena felt her heart soften. "I am okay, Luca. Just a little sore." Luca stared down at his hands. "I'm sorry about what I said at first, about you running away." He looked up, eyes wet and red. "You did not run, even when someone tried to hurt you." Elena reached out, took the boy's hand, and squeezed gently. They sat like that for a long moment, in a warm silence before Luca left, so she could rest. An hour later, Elena went downstairs and found Dominic in his office. He was seated behind the desk, but he stood the moment she appeared in the doorway. His dark eyes swept over her, stopped at the silk scarf wrapped around her throat to hide the bruises, and turned darker. "What are you going to do with Marcus?" Elena asked bluntly, unwilling to circle around it. Dominic watched her for a long time before he answered. "He will not bother you again." The blood in Elena's body turned to ice. She looked at him, at his hands, at the perfect composure on that aristocratic face. "Did you kill him? You think I killed him? I do not know what you did." Her voice rose higher than she meant it to. "I do not know what kind of man you are. I only know he is gone and you are telling me he will not bother me anymore. So what else am I supposed to think? Dominic came around the desk and stopped in front of her. Marcus Cole is alive. He took out his phone, opened a video, and held it out to her. But his life is not. Elena looked at the screen. Marcus sat on a chair in a dark room, his face swollen, his eyes panicked. He was speaking, confessing, describing in detail the 2 years he abused her, the beatings, the night he almost killed her, the way he watched her after she escaped. Every word was recorded clearly, in his own voice. This video, along with witnesses, has been sent to the Chicago Police Department, his family, and the 3 largest media outlets in the city, Dominic explained. Marcus Cole was arrested this morning for violating the restraining order, assault causing injury, conspiracy to kidnap, and a long list of other charges. His old friends in the department will not be able to shield him this time. Not when the whole city is watching him confess to his crimes. Elena did not know what she was supposed to feel. Relief, gratitude, fear. You asked me not to kill him, Dominic went on. So I destroyed him instead of killing him. His reputation, his freedom, his future. He will rot in prison while the whole world knows what he is. Why? Elena whispered. Why did you listen to me? Dominic stepped closer. Close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. Close enough that she could see tiny flecks of gold inside those dark eyes. Because you asked. His voice roughened, and I realized that I can't refuse you anything. The air between them thickened. Elena saw Dominic's gaze drop to her mouth, then lift back to her eyes. He leaned in, slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted to. She did not. Her heart hammered as the distance between them closed. Then Dominic stopped. Just a few centimeters from her lips, he stopped. I will not take what is not freely given. His voice was raw, like sandpaper. Never. That is not who I am. He stepped back, leaving a cold space between them. Elena stood there, breathing hard, realizing the most dangerous thing about Dominic Caruso was not his capacity for violence, but his restraint, and the way he looked at her as if she had the power to destroy him completely. 2 weeks after the incident with Marcus, life inside the Caruso estate slowly found a new rhythm. A rhythm Elena had never dared to dream of. Marcus Cole was rotting in Cook County Jail awaiting trial, with evidence piled high enough to make sure he would not see the light of freedom for many years to come. Lily was recovering well on the new medication with a private doctor in a secure Gold Coast apartment, her cheeks looking rosier every time they video called. Rosa had been moved into a cleaner, warmer apartment, with a full year of rent paid in advance by an anonymous benefactor Elena knew exactly how to name. For the first time in years, she did not wake with dread pressing on her chest, did not count coins to see if there would be enough for medicine. But the biggest change came from Luca. The boy no longer called her Miss Morgan or Nanny with contempt in his voice. One morning, when Elena drove him to school, Luca turned back and waved, calling out, "Bye, Ellie," as naturally as if he had said it his whole life. Elena stood frozen, her heart racing with emotion, watching the car until it disappeared beyond the gates. Dad smiles more now, Luca told her a few days later, while they sat together working on homework. He did not look up from his notebook, but there was real wonder in his voice. I mean, he really smiles. I do not think I have ever seen that before. Elena did not know how to answer, so she stayed quiet, pretending to focus on the math problem in front of her while her heart beat out of rhythm. That evening, for the first time in years, all 3 of them ate dinner together in the small dining room instead of the main dining hall that was too large and too cold. Elena had offered to teach Luca how to make pasta, and he agreed with an eagerness he tried to hide. They stood side by side in the kitchen while Elena showed him how to knead the dough, roll it thin, cut it into strands. Luca concentrated so fiercely his tongue stuck out just a little as he tried to cut perfectly straight lines. "My mom used to make this," he said suddenly, his voice smaller. "I do not remember much, but I remember the smell. I remember her at the stove and me on a high chair watching." He paused, his hand trembling on the knife. Then she was not there anymore. Elena placed her hand on his shoulder, and that was all it took. Luca turned and buried his face against her shoulder and cried, not the loud crying of a child, but the silent, choking sobs of a boy who had been holding it in for too long. Elena held him tight, smoothed his hair, whispered words that did not matter, only love. When she looked up, she saw Dominic standing in the kitchen doorway, watching them with eyes she could not read. Their gazes met over Luca's head, and in that moment Elena saw something break inside those dark eyes. Another wall collapsing. That night, after Luca was asleep, Elena and Dominic sat on the second-floor balcony, looking out at the snow-covered garden under moonlight. They drank red wine in a comfortable silence, the kind that did not need to be filled with words. "You have changed this house," Dominic said at last. "Changed Luca, changed." He stopped. "Changed what?" Elena asked softly. He did not answer, only looked at her with a gaze whose meaning she was beginning to understand. Quick footsteps broke the moment. Marco appeared at the balcony door, his face tense. "Boss, you need to talk. Private." Dominic rose and followed Marco inside. 10 minutes later he returned, but his expression was completely different. The softness was gone, replaced by the familiar cold mask. "What is it?" Elena asked. "Nothing. Just work." He was lying. Elena knew he was lying, but she did not press, because she also knew that in his world there were truths she was not ready to face. For the first time in years, the Caruso estate felt like a home, but Elena could not shake the feeling that happiness this fragile was always borrowed, and the debt would come due soon. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Elena jolted awake to an unusual uproar from downstairs. Men's voices, hurried footsteps, doors opening and closing again and again. She threw on a robe and stepped out into the hall, her heart racing with a bad feeling she could not explain. The Caruso estate was never loud like this, especially not at this hour. She moved through the dark corridor, down the staircase, and stopped short at what she saw in the great living room. Dominic stood in the center of it, surrounded by Marco and at least 6 other men she had never seen before, all dressed in black, all wearing the same lethal tension on their faces. Maps and photographs were spread across the table, phones rang without pause, and the air felt thick with danger. Dominic lifted his head at the sound of her steps, and what Elena saw on his face turned her blood to ice. He looked pale, and in those deep black eyes was something she had never seen in the man who always held perfect control. Fear, guilt, and a cold fury simmering just beneath the surface. "Elena," his voice was rough, "you should not be down here. What happened?" She stepped closer despite Marco's warning look. "Dominic, what is going on?" A tight silence wrapped the room. Dominic watched her for a long moment, then exhaled and held out the phone that displayed a message. Elena read, and the world around her collapsed. A message from an unknown number, along with a photo of Rosa bound to a chair, her mouth taped, her eyes wide with terror. The old woman for the nurse. "Warehouse 17, Pilsen, come alone Caruso. You have until noon." "No," Elena whispered, the phone nearly slipping from her trembling hand. "No, no, no. This is my fault. She has nothing to do with this. This is Volkov's fault." Dominic cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. "Not yours, but she was taken because of me. If you had not saved my son that night, if you were not here, Volkov would still have found another way to strike at me." Dominic gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "This is a war between me and him. You and Rosa are only pieces he is trying to use." Marco stepped in, his voice tight. "Boss, this is a double trap. Volkov wants you to split your forces. If you go to the warehouse, the estate loses protection, and he hits Luca. If you do not go, the old woman dies, and you lose face in front of every other family." He shook his head, grim. "It is lose-lose. We have to save her," Elena almost shouted. "She is innocent. She cared for me and Lily for years. I can't let her die because of me." Dominic did not speak. He looked down at the map on the table, at the men around him, at Elena. 1 minute passed, 2. The room was so still Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Then Dominic made his decision. "I will go personally." His voice was strangely calm. "With Elena." "What?" Marco exploded. "Are you out of your mind? That is suicide. You are putting both lives in Volkov's hands. They expect me to choose my empire over her people." Dominic looked at Elena, and in those dark eyes she saw something she did not dare name. That is the only scenario they did not plan for. But Marco will stay with the main security team to protect Luca. The estate will be fully sealed. No one in, no one out. Dominic turned to Marco, his voice an order that could not be argued with. "If there is any sign of an attack, you take Luca to the safe house immediately. Do not wait for my command." Marco held his boss's gaze for a long moment, then nodded heavily. "Understood." Half an hour later, when everything had been arranged, Elena stood in the foyer in the dark clothes Dominic had told her to wear. Luca appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes red, and ran down to hug her so tightly she could not breathe. "Come back," he whispered. "Both of you. Promise me. Elena hugged him back and kissed the top of his head. I promise. Luca turned and hugged his father, and Dominic, the coldest man Elena had ever known, held his son as if it might be the last time. In the car on the way to Pilsen, Dominic placed a small device in Elena's palm. If anything happens to me, press this button. Get Rosa out. Do not look back. Elena looked down at the device, then up at him, green eyes meeting black eyes in the darkness of the SUV. I do not need an escape plan. I need you to survive this. Warehouse 17 sat on the edge of Pilsen's industrial district, a hulking red brick building abandoned for so long that its shattered windows looked like empty eye sockets staring down at a parking lot choked with trash and weeds. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the weak winter sun could not lift the gloom that clung to the place. The black SUV was left 2 blocks away, and Dominic, Elena, and 2 of his most elite guards approached on foot, keeping to the shadows cast by the surrounding derelict buildings. The air reeked of rust and old machine oil, mixed with the knife-edged bite of winter wind. Elena tried to control her breathing, but her heart pounded as if it wanted to break free of her ribs. Before they went in, Dominic stopped, drew a small black gun from inside his coat, and placed it in her hand. You know how to use this? Elena looked down at the weapon, felt the cold weight of metal in her palm. Point and shoot. I learn fast. Something flickered across Dominic's eyes, maybe worry, maybe admiration. Then he nodded and led them toward a side entrance. They slipped through a rusted steel door that one of the guards unlocked in silence, stepping into the thick dark inside. Thin light seeped in through broken high windows, forming faint shafts that cut through dust hanging in the air. The warehouse was a massive maze of stacked, corroded shipping containers, creating narrow, lightless corridors where anyone could be hiding. Dominic moved first, gun ready, with the caution and precision of a man who lived with danger as a daily language. Elena stayed close behind him, the 2 guards covering the rear, all of them moving in near-perfect silence. But it was the silence itself that felt most terrifying. No footsteps ahead, no voices, no sentries. As if the entire building were holding its breath, waiting for them to step into the snare. They found the first small room, after about 5 minutes of weaving through the container maze. The steel door was ajar, and when Dominic pushed it wider, Elena felt her heart drop into her stomach. An empty chair stood in the middle of the room, severed rope scattered across filthy concrete, torn strips of tape lay abandoned in a corner. But Rosa was not there. Are we too late? Elena whispered, her voice shaking. Dominic crouched, touched the rope, then lifted his head with a fierce, focused look. It is still warm. She was here minutes ago. They moved her. At that moment, a sound echoed from deeper inside the warehouse, something falling, or someone knocking into metal. Dominic signaled the group toward it. Slower now, even more careful. They passed another row of containers, turned left, then turned right, until they found another door at the end of the passage. Dominic pushed it open, and Elena nearly cried out with relief. Rosa sat there, tied to a metal chair, her mouth taped, but alive. Her eyes went wide with terror when she saw them, and she began to struggle, trying to say something through the tape. Elena rushed to her, dropped to her knees, and started peeling the tape from her mouth, while her other hand worked at the knots in the rope. Rosa, it is me. I am here. You are going to be okay. Dominic held the doorway, gun raised, eyes sweeping the darkness outside. The 2 guards took positions on either side of him, forming a shield. When the last strip of tape came free, Rosa sucked in a deep breath and whispered, her voice trembling with fear. It is a trap, Mija. They are everywhere. They are waiting. She did not get to finish. Footsteps rose from every direction, heavy, steady, closing in. Elena looked up and met Dominic's eyes for a brief instant, and she saw he already knew. He had always known it was a trap. He came anyway. Get her out, now. Dominic's order was cold as ice. Before Elena could even move, the warehouse erupted into chaos, gunfire cracking out of the shadows from all around them. Chaos exploded like the gates of hell thrown open. Gunfire cracked from every direction, bullets slamming into metal with shrieking impacts, screams and running feet echoing through the warehouse. Elena dropped low, shielding Rosa with her own body, while she fought to get the last rope off Rosa's wrists. One of Dominic's guards went down, blood spraying from his shoulder, yet he kept firing from the floor. Dominic moved like a lethal ghost, precise and ruthless, every shot finding a target in the darkness. Go. Dominic roared at Elena, his voice cutting through the violence. I will cover you. East exit, now. Elena hauled Rosa to her feet, slung the older woman's arm over her shoulder, and started running. Rosa was weak after hours bound to that chair, her steps unsteady, but Elena did not slow. They sprinted through the container maze, turning left, turning right, following faded exit signs on the walls. Gunfire still thundered behind them, and every shot felt like a blade driven into Elena's heart. She did not know if Dominic was alive. She did not know if she would ever see him again. But she could not stop. She had to get Rosa out. She had promised. Daylight seeped ahead, spilling through the crack of an emergency door like a promise of freedom. Elena pushed faster, dragging Rosa with her, hope hammering in her chest. 10 steps. 5. 3. Then a figure stepped out of a dark corner and cut them off. Viktor Volkov stood there alone, a gun aimed straight at Elena's chest. He wore an expensive black leather coat, silver hair slicked back to perfection, and a cold smile like a man enjoying a play. His icy gray eyes swept over Elena, then lingered on her face with a sick fascination, the famous nurse. His voice was sweet as honey laced with poison. Caruso's little weakness, running right into my arms. Elena shoved Rosa behind her and stood in front of the older woman like a shield. The small gun Dominic had given her was still in her coat pocket, but she knew she was not fast enough, not skilled enough. If she reached for it, Volkov would shoot before she could aim, but she did not tremble. She met those ice-gray eyes, and instead of fear she felt a strange calm spreading through her. She had faced death before. She had looked into Marcus's eyes while he strangled her. She had survived. She would survive this too. "You will not shoot me." Her voice came out steady, clear, almost startling in its calm. "I am worth more alive, as a hostage, as leverage." Volkov lifted an eyebrow, surprise flickering before it vanished. Brave, foolish, but brave. He tilted his head, studying her as if truly seeing her for the first time. "Caruso must care about you very much. Let her go. She is innocent. No one is innocent in this world, little girl." Volkov gave a short laugh. "But it does not matter now. Caruso is probably dead." "My men." A single gunshot cracked from the darkness behind Volkov. He did not even have time to turn before Dominic appeared as if from nowhere, stepping out of the shadow between two containers, gun pressed to the side of Volkov's head. Blood streaked Dominic's face, but Elena knew it was not his. Dominic's dark eyes were cold as a frozen hell, empty of everything except lethal focus. "Put the gun down, right now." Volkov stood very still, his weapon still trained on Elena, but the smile had vanished from his face. A taut moment stretched, no one moving, no one breathing. "You targeted my son's health." Dominic's voice was terrifyingly calm, like water before a flood. "You kidnapped an innocent woman. You threatened someone who belongs to me." He stepped closer, the barrel driving harder into the back of Volkov's head. "Any one of those is worth dying for. All 3. That is an eternity of suffering." Volkov did not panic. Instead, he laughed, a cold sound that rang through air stretched tight as wire. "Kill me, Caruso. Kill me and my men will tear this city apart. Kill me and you start a war you can't win." He kept his gun aimed at Elena even though he knew Dominic could fire at any moment. "You think you have won. You only brought 3 men in here. I have 20 surrounding this warehouse." As if to prove it, gunfire erupted again from outside, violent and relentless. Elena felt her heart sink. They were trapped. Even if Dominic killed Volkov, they would never make it out with 20 shooters waiting. She looked at Dominic, searching his face for fear, but she found nothing except a deadly calm. Then, without warning, the gunfire outside stopped. Total silence. Not a single sound. As if the whole world had stopped breathing. The warehouse's main doors burst open and daylight poured in like a flood, and stepping through the threshold came Marco Benedetti, followed by at least 20 men in black suits, all armed, all wearing the hard, finished expressions of people who had done their job. "The perimeter is secured, boss," Marco reported, calm and professional. "All hostile targets have been neutralized." Volkov went pale as a corpse. The gun in his hand began to tremble as he turned his head toward Marco's men, then back to Dominic, and finally understood the truth. He had been played. His trap had become his own. "You think I would come here without a contingency plan?" Dominic said at last, his voice like ice melting in hell. "I knew it was a trap the moment I received your message. But you were right about one thing. I can't let innocent people die because of the war between us." He stepped closer, the barrel still pressed to Volkov's head. "So I came. But Marco and my main force came too. You just did not see them." Elena looked at Marco, then back at Dominic, fitting the pieces together. When Marco had spoken privately with Dominic the night before, it had not been bad news. It had been the plan. Dominic had known everything. He had just not told her. "Drop the gun," Dominic ordered Volkov, his voice no louder, somehow more terrifying. "Right now." Volkov looked around for a way out, but there was none. His men were down, his allies were not here. He was completely alone. At last, with a heavy exhale, he let the gun fall. Instantly, 2 of Marco's men rushed in, cuffed Volkov's hands behind his back, and forced him down onto the concrete. Elena waited for the shot, waited for Dominic to finish his enemy the way any Mafia king would. But instead, Dominic lowered his gun and looked at Volkov with an expression Elena had never seen before. Cold, ruthless, and something even more terrifying than hatred, complete contempt. "Death is too quick for you." Dominic's voice sounded like a funeral bell. "I want you to watch everything you built turn to ash." He turned to Marco. "Turn him over to the FBI. I have people inside who will make sure every file on his operations goes public. Human trafficking, drugs, money laundering, everything." Dominic leaned down and stared straight into Volkov's eyes. "You will rot in federal prison while your empire collapses. You will live long enough to watch everything you love get stripped away, and you will remember that this is the price of touching what is mine." Elena stood there with Rosa shaking in her arms and watched it all unfold like a play she had never agreed to see. She looked at Dominic, the man who had held her hand in the car, the man who brushed his son's hair with tenderness in the dark, and she did not recognize him now. That man was gone. In his place was Il Silenzio, the silence, and Elena finally understood why this city trembled at that name. Northwestern's private hospital sat on the north side of the city, a bright white building with quiet hallways and private rooms reserved for people who could afford them. Rosa lay in the hospital bed with an IV in her thin arm, her skin pale, but her eyes far calmer than they had been a few hours earlier. Elena sat beside her, holding that wrinkled hand tightly, feeling a weak pulse beneath skin as fragile as paper. "That man," Rosa said at last, her voice rough from dehydration and exhaustion, "he came because of you. Because of me. He could have died." Elena did not know what to say. She only squeezed Rosa's hand harder, stared down at the pristine white sheet, and tried to swallow the lump in her throat. "You love him, don't you?" Rosa asked, old eyes still sharp enough to see straight through her. Elena did not answer. She did not have to. Her silence was answer enough. 2 hours later, when the doctor confirmed Rosa was stable and needed rest, Elena left the hospital in the familiar black SUV. When the vehicle stopped in front of the Caruso estate, she barely had time to step out before a small body slammed into her with enough force to almost knock her over. "I was so scared." Luca clung to her, his face buried in her shoulder, his voice breaking. "Do not ever do that again. Do not ever leave me alone like that again." Elena wrapped her arms around him, kissed the top of his head, felt his small body shaking against hers. "I am sorry. I am here. I am safe." Over Luca's shoulder, Elena saw Dominic standing on the front steps a few yards away. He did not come closer. He did not speak. He only stood there, dark eyes watching her with something she could not read. And Elena realized, with a twisting ache in her chest, that he was waiting for her to be afraid, waiting for her to run, waiting for her to look at him the way everyone else did when they finally saw Il Silenzio for what he truly was. That night, when the estate had fallen asleep, Elena went downstairs for water and heard voices coming from Dominic's office. She stopped outside the door left slightly open, knowing she should not listen, unable to make herself walk away. "Volkov has been turned over to the FBI," Marco said. "The Bratva Empire is collapsing faster than we expected. All the files have gone public. Trafficking, laundering, everything." A pause. "But there is something else in the recovered material." "What?" "Files on Sarah Chen, Luca's previous nurse." A heavy silence. Elena felt the blood in her body turn to ice. "He had a spy inside our own house," Marco went on, his voice tight. "She reported Luca's schedule, habits, medical vulnerabilities, everything Volkov needed to plan an attack on the boy's health." "I know." Dominic's voice was cold as ice. "That is why she no longer works for us." Elena backed away from the door, her heart racing. She returned to her room but could not sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, fitting the pieces together, and felt a cold truth taking shape in her mind. The next morning she went to Dominic's office. He was behind the desk, looking more tired than she had ever seen him. bruises and scratches from yesterday's fight still visible on his face. When he saw her, he looked up, and for the first time she saw real worry in his dark eyes. "The nurse before me," Elena said, straight to the point. "She was not just fired, was she?" Dominic did not answer right away. He watched her for a long moment, and in that look Elena saw the truth she already knew. "She betrayed my son. She put Luca's life in danger, and you killed her." It was not a question. It was a statement. Dominic stood, came around the desk, and stopped in front of her. "I protect my family. By killing people. By whatever means are necessary." Elena looked at him. The man who had saved her life, saved Rosa's life, held her hand in the dark, and sworn that no one would ever touch her again. The man who had killed. The man who would kill again if he had to. She stood at a crossroads. She loved this man. She could not deny it anymore. But could she love the darkness that came with him? Could she live in a world where protection meant death? That night, Elena could not sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with images she could not erase. Dominic with a gun pressed to Volkov's head, his voice cold as ice as he pronounced a sentence. The eyes of Il Silencio, without mercy, without hesitation, and then other images forced their way in. Dominic holding her hand in the car after Marcus attacked her. Dominic standing in the dark watching his son sleep. Dominic asking for the full name of the man who hurt her, his voice like a blade. 2 men, 1 body. And Elena did not know whether she could love them both. She got up, pulled on her robe, and stepped out of her room with no real destination, only the need to move, the need to escape the 4 walls that were squeezing her. Her feet carried her down the dark hallway, down the stairs, past silent rooms sleeping through the night. She stopped when she saw a thin line of light beneath the door to Dominic's office. 2 in the morning, and he was still awake. She stood there a long moment with her hand on the knob, her heart beating out of control. Then she pushed the door open without knocking. Dominic sat in the darkness, lit only by a small desk lamp that caught one corner of his face, a glass of whiskey in his hand, but still full, untouched. He looked up at the sound of the door, and for an instant, Elena saw real exhaustion on his face before it vanished behind control. "You should be asleep. You too." Tense silence stretched between them. Elena stepped farther in, stopped in the center of the room, and looked at him with eyes she was no longer trying to hide. "You could have let them take me," she said into the dark. "That would have been the logical choice. Protect Luca, sacrifice the nurse. I do not matter more than your son, more than your empire." Dominic set the glass on the desk, the sound of crystal on wood sharp and dry. "You think you are a pawn to me. Am I not? Everyone in your world is a pawn. Volkov, Marco, the people you kill, the people you save. All of them serving some purpose." Dominic rose and came around the desk, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. Elena did not back away. She held her ground, chin lifted, meeting the black eyes coming closer. "The night you found my son," Dominic said, his voice roughening. "You stopped for a stranger when no one else would. You had nothing, not even enough money to get through the day, and you still chose to help." He stopped 1 step away, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of him. "That kind of courage, that kind of light, it is worth more than any empire." "I saw what you did today," Elena whispered, "your real self, the darkness, and you are still here." It was not a question. It was an observation, touched with an astonishment he could not hide. Elena looked at him, a man standing in the dark as if he belonged to it, a man who had killed and would kill again, a man who had risked his life to save an old woman he had never met, simply because she mattered to Elena. And in that moment, Elena made her choice. She stepped forward. "Not Dominic. Her. I am not afraid of your darkness," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I am afraid of losing you." Dominic went perfectly still, his body rigid as if she had struck him. Elena lifted her hand, slowly, giving him time to step back if he wanted. He did not. Her fingers touched his cheek, felt the warmth of his skin and the rough shadow of new stubble. He closed his eyes as if her touch was too much and not enough at once. "I spent my whole life running from monsters," Elena whispered, her fingers sliding over the scar at his brow. "Maybe it is time I chose my own." Dominic opened his eyes, and what Elena saw there made her forget how to breathe. Not the coldness of Il Silencio, not the perfect control of a kingpin, but hurt, hunger, the loneliness of a man who had stood alone for too long. Then he kissed her, or maybe she kissed him. Or maybe they met in the middle, two broken souls finding each other in the dark. The kiss was both gentle and desperate, like two drowning people clinging to each other in a storm. Dominic's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, and Elena felt herself melt into him, every wall she had built collapsing in a single moment. When they finally pulled apart, forehead to forehead, their breath mingling in the narrow space between them, Dominic whispered, his voice both command and prayer at once. "Stay. Not as Luca's nurse, not as my employee. Stay because this house was never a home until you came." The next morning, Elena woke in a room that was not hers. The first light of spring slipped through the gap in the curtains, painting warm golden bands across the pristine white sheet. She lay still for a while, feeling the heat of the body beside her, listening to steady breathing near her ear. Outside the window, the snow was melting, glittering drops falling from the eaves like tiny crystals, a quiet sign that the brutal winter was finally beginning to let go. Elena turned to look at Dominic. In sleep, he looked completely different. His face was peaceful, the usual coldness and constant tension gone. The worry lines on his forehead had softened, making him look younger than his age, 36. Her gaze traced the scars on his body, each one a story she did not yet know, each one a piece of the darkness she had chosen to love. His hand rested on his abdomen, calloused and marked with scratches, the same hand that had killed and the same hand that had held her in the night, promising that no one would ever be allowed to touch her again. Elena lay there, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling that had somehow become familiar, and thought about the road that had brought her here. Only a few months earlier, she had been an exhausted dishwasher living on a handful of tips that could not even cover a bus fare. Now Lily was much better, cared for by a private doctor in a beautiful apartment in a safe neighborhood. Rosa was recovering in the best hospital in the city, protected and looked after. Marcus was rotting in jail, finally paying for what he had done. And she, Elena Morgan, an orphaned girl who had been abused and believed she would never find peace, had found home in a way she could never have imagined. A knock shattered the quiet. "Dad, Ellie, breakfast is ready." Luca's voice carried from the hallway, bright with energy and impatience. Dominic stirred, opened his eyes, and the first thing he did was turn to look at Elena. Dark eyes met green eyes in the morning light, and she saw something there she had never seen before. Peace, softness, no walls left between them. "Good morning." His voice was rough with sleep, but warm in a way that made her heart tremble. "Good morning." They looked at each other for a long time, smiling like fools, until the knock came again, louder this time. "I know you are in there. The pancakes are getting cold." Dominic let out a breath, got up, and opened the door. Luca stood there with his arms crossed and a mischievous grin on his face. The boy looked from his father to Elena, still sitting on the bed, then back at his father, and laughed out loud. "About time. I am exhausted watching you two pretend you do not like each other. Truly exhausted." Dominic lifted an eyebrow. "Since when did you know?" "Dad." Luca shook his head like he was talking to a small child. "I am 14, not blind. Now come downstairs. Isabella made pancakes, and I am not saving any for anyone." Luca turned and ran down the stairs, laughter echoing through the hallway. Dominic turned back to Elena, and for the first time she saw him truly smile. A bright, unguarded smile that lit up his whole face. Breakfast happened in the small dining room, sunlight spilling through the windows and the air full of warm pancake scent. The three of them sat around the table, Luca talking about an upcoming math test, Dominic listening with an attentiveness Elena knew he rarely gave anyone, and Elena sitting there watching the two men in her life, feeling her heart fill so completely it almost hurt. The estate was still so luxurious it felt unreal. Dominic's world was still dangerous and full of shadows. There would be more enemies, more threats, more long nights of worry. Elena knew that, but when she looked around this room, when she saw Luca fighting his father for the last piece of pancake, when she saw Dominic laughing with his son in a way Luca said he had never laughed before, she knew one thing for certain. This was her home. Elena Morgan once believed her life was a chain of tragedies with no end. Orphaned at 19, abused for years, broken beyond repair. But on that freezing winter night, when she stopped for a stranger in a dark alley, she did not know she was stepping into darkness to find her own light. Dominic Caruso was the embodiment of darkness, but even darkness needs light in order to exist. And together, they would build what neither of them had ever dared to hope for, a family. The story of Elena and Dominic brings us a profound lesson about life. It is that even when you are in the darkest circumstances, Even when you think life has abandoned you, there is always a glimmer of light waiting at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. A small act of kindness, like Elena stopping to help a stranger, can change your whole life. And most importantly, true love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about accepting and loving the flaws, the shadows, inside the other person. If this story touched your heart, please press the like button and share this video with the people you love. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the moving stories we bring you every day. We would love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever lived through moments that felt impossible to survive? Do you believe in unexpected twists of fate in life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every message, every feeling you choose to offer from the depths of your heart. Thank you for staying with us to the very end. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.